evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Talking Films Online. This week, we are discussing a Malayalam film, Kumbalangi Nights. The film was suggested to us by Kavya. I don't have to introduce Kavya to Talking Films Online group. I think all of you are acquainted with her. Those who are joining us for the first time, here is an introduction of Kavya. Kavya Krishna teaches is an assistant professor at the Department of Humanistic Studies, IIT BHU Varanasi. She received her PhD from the Department of Cultural Studies, the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. She worked on dance and gender performativity with a specific focus on Mohiniyattam. Her areas of research interest are gender studies, cultural studies, and also literatures in various Indian languages. Her research articles have been, she's an internationally published author, having published in various journals, international journals, and also she has published book chapters in several anthologies. And now I'm also very happy in this meeting to welcome Rajiv Ramachandran. Rajiv Ramachandran is the one who has subtitled for the film Kumbalangi Nights. So we are very fortunate to have him this evening with us for our discussion. This time round, when I watched the film a second time, I paid particular attention to the subtitles, knowing that Rajiv Ramachandran will be joining us. Rajiv Ramachandran is an independent journalist, verification specialist, and an audio-visual translator based in Kochi, Kerala. He's one of the first generation journalists of Malayalam news television. As editor with various news organizations, he had been part of a leadership which created a structure for media production in Malayalam with the values of efficiency and transparency. Lately, he has been writing subtitles and undertaking audiovisual translations for Malayalam and English films, which is why he is with us today. He's an empaneled translator for Disney India. He has subtitled for films like Kumbalangi Nights, Virus, Android Kunjappan, Kilometers and Kilometers, and also for many Disney Marvel movies. Welcome to Kavya Krishna, as well as welcome to Rajiv Ramachandran. Kavya first will be initiating the discussion. So over to you, Kavya.
Actually, I won't be giving any lecture on the film, but I will just say some areas into which we can look in terms of this film, and we can have discussion afterwards. So I have noted down certain areas which we can look at. First of all, of course, is the question of masculinity, which all reviewers of the film have already pointed out. So many reviews of the film talked about it as a film which did decoding of what we in academic terms call as hegemonic masculinity. The many reviews use the word hyper masculinity, but I think it's better to use hegemonic masculinity for this film. So from the very first frame, when we see Shammi onwards, to the the off-quoted scenes like where he looks at the mirror and calls himself a complete man who grooms his mustache to perfection, who even removes a sign of femininity like the bindi from even his reflection on the mirror, and somebody who believes that cooking is not a man's job, and who in a very very forcefully tries to become the head of the family. And you can remember the scene where he very tactically takes the central chair of the dining table. He moves to the central chair of the dining table. So one direction this discussion can take is, of course, the way it decodes hegemonic masculinity. Um, so in a way, Shammi portrays the deep-seated insecurities underlying aggressive and moralizing masculinity uh, in a very good way. But there are towards the end of the movie, you can see that this uh, hegemonic masculinity is shown as a kind of toxic masculinity, which is also pathological in another sense. It becomes kind of sick. So there are critics of the same, but I think that uh, in one sense the film does a caricature of what we call as hegemonic masculinity, and making it something as sickness or madness. It in a way personifies that toxic masculinity into the character of Shammi, and then makes it into a madness. So many reviews have made negative comments about making this toxic masculinity as madness. Another way in which we can look at the question of masculinity in the film is by placing it against the films of the 1990s, late 1990s and early 2000, the hyper masculine Malayalam films of Mohanlal and Mammootty, which glorified toxic masculinity. But the same things which, for example, say Mohanlal or Mammootty had done in films like Ballet and Williot and all these kinds of elder brother figures, and larger than life figures like Devasuram, or the movies of Suresh Gopi. Actually, Shammi does the same kind of things in this film, but here it invokes a kind of not laughter but a sarcastic effect, which helps us in decoding what actually toxic masculinity looks like. So that's one sense, that's a very obvious thing which this film does, and it's oft discussed about. I don't think I have to discuss it much. So uh, here when he calls himself a hero, actually he does all the heroic acts which usually heroes in the film does, but he becomes a kind of anti-hero, if you want to call him like that. Then against this character of Shammi is placed the subaltern masculine figures of uh, the four half brothers, Saji, Boni, Bobby and Frankie. So even though we can call them subaltern masculine figures, you can see a potential Shammi in the character of, I felt that a potential Shammi in the characterization of Bobby, who in the narrative is slapped and put it into a place through his lover. Actually, what happens is that in the narrative of the film, all other characters, all other male characters undergoes transformation in their contact with female characters and through life circumstances, but Shammi is the only one who remains unchanged. So as we have seen in the film, Saji uh, actually is somebody who cries, and he asks his younger brother to take him to a psychologist. So in that sense, we can move on to the next topic which the film raises, I felt, is the question of family. So the most celebrated sentence of the movie is, how many fathers and mothers do you have? The question which Baby Mol asks in a very romantic scene and in a very playful manner, but that forms, I think, a central question for the film in terms of its representation of a patriarchal family. And interestingly, in both the families, on the one hand, there is the family of Baby Mall, which is in quote unquote sense, no, a cultured good family within the locale, and the other family of the four brothers, which are on the margins, without, four men without any destination, just weighing away their time in the way they want. So, and if we look at the same scene where Saji cries and he asks his younger brother to take him to a psychologist, we can see that the hierarchy between the brothers is in a way breaking there. And further, I was thinking in this sense, like, at the end of the movie, when these four women, that too in a very unconventional way, one is the widow of the Tamilian Murugan, along with her newborn baby, the African American lover of Bonnie and Baby Moll. When all these women come to the family, it actually constitutes a kind of new kind of family, which is based on not blood relations, but something based on love, empathy, and kindness, which which deconstructs in a way or abolishes what we now see as a legal fiction called family. So it challenges existing normative and structural understanding about the institution of family. So there are dialogues in the film which says, in which Bobby makes this claim that this what he said, sad sentence I forgot, but the culture, the good families have a culture, and we don't have that. But through the narrative, we say that the cultured family is actually a kind of very patriarchal and toxic family, which is not livable for the members within it, even though from the outside it is a cultural, very cultured family. So in times like, I have read an article which says that in times when there are gay, lesbian families are possible, when surrogate parenting is possible, when family formation through adoption is possible, it actually proposes a new kind of idea about family itself, something which we can further think about. Another direction the discussion can take is in terms of the very film career of the actor Fahad Fasil. So all the characters which he had done, whether it is 22 female Kottayam or Tondi Mudalam Sakshim, this one, in most of his films, he had taken up very unconventional, non-heroic in many sense characters, and where the very figure of Fahad Fasil himself, his bald-headedness or his short figure, all these things in a way deconstructed the way Malayalam film had thought about the concept of a hero for a film. That's something else which we can talk about. Then another direction the discussion can take is in terms of the women characters in the film. So all the women characters in the film, whether it is a like very small character like Sumisha, who is Bobby's friend's lover, to all other characters, they have an agency and they are all decision makers about their own life in the course of the film. So so Sumisha, actually a very small character, Sumisha, she actually questions Bobby when he asks whether you don't believe in beauty. So she has her own definition of beauty, and she makes that clear. To somebody like Murugan's wife, the Tamilian Murugan's wife, she takes a decision not to frame Saji in a police case at a critical juncture. To Baby Moll, who of course questions Shammi, and even asks a question like, even says something like it's not technically possible to have many fathers. So that question we can actually connect to the question of how many fathers and mothers you have, and the question of family again. But anyway, now I'm talking in terms of the women characters and their agency in the film. So that's another direction. So in terms of masculinity, in terms of a patriarchal family, established family, the career of Fahad Fasil and the idea of hero within the history of film, then the women characters and their agency, these are four directions which the film can take, the discussion can take. Then another direction which the discussion can take place is in terms of place. So the very beautiful locale of Kumbalangi Island. We can think about, I think, in terms of so many other films which are set in very, which are set outside the Kochi city. So I think there are articles about the Kochi city within the new wave films of Malayalam cinema, but there are films like Annayum Rasoolum, Kumbalangi Nights, and so many other films which are set outside the locale of the Kochi city, outskirts of Kochi. So regarding space, and if we think about something like the international release of films or on Amazon Prime and all that, Kerala as a tourist spot, these are another directions. Then the brilliant camera work of Shaiju Khalid, which of course makes many of the frames of the film indeed poetic, and the lighting, the coloring, the music of Sushin Shah, which is quite international in its sense. All these things needs to be discussed, I think. And it has this title, in the title, something called fishing choreography, where catching fish using the Chinese net is choreographed to poetic perfection in the film, and uh, it's every frame is blended into the narrative of the film. So when I watched some interviews of Shyam Pushkaran, he, in all his discussions, he had said this, that the film has multiple layers and nothing which is happening in the film, not even one frame happened accidentally. Everything, every dialogue, every scene is thought about and painstakingly written. So in that sense, uh, what marks the film different is that in when we compare it to earlier films, there are no longer 4 minutes, 3 minutes of dialogues. There are very small but very subtle dialogues, which actually questions many of our conventional thoughts. Say uh, this very small dialogue by Baby Moll with her sister in the kitchen, when she says that Bobby is a Christian, she says it's Jesus is somebody whom we know. It's not, Jesus is not unfamiliar for us. That's a comment she makes about religion. Or the, which I already discussed, the Sumisha's dialogue about her lover's color and look. So she asks, doesn't he look like the actor Vinayakan? So it actually questions things like color, beauty, in through very small dialogues. Then actually through the dialogue between Saji, Bobby and Shami in the barber shop, about place as such. Actually, the place, the house, the doorless house of Saji and his brothers are located in a ghettos of Kumbalangi itself, where people abandon cats. It's an outside of, it's an outside place. So it's a ghettos where people who are marginal spend their life. So the comment it makes about the ghettos of the not just city, every place will have a ghettos. Then another question it raises, I think, is about profession. Bobby, who in his adolescent kind of state of mind considers fishing as a not respectable profession, but he, in the course of the narrative, he actually, I think, goes in from adolescent kind of mindset to adulthood, and he is ready to take up the profession of fishing. So the respectability of profession, but we can also think about something like whether it has something to do with the 2018 floods, and suddenly fishermen became the hero of Kerala, whether it has something to do with that, we can think about. Then in this like what I wanted to say was that in the in very subtle ways, through very small dialogues, it says so many things. Uh, so about consent, about sex, about family, about gender roles. So many of our conservative beliefs regarding all these things are subtly questioned, about right and wrong. Even I think Sham Pushkaran does a self-trolling when he quotes his own dialogue. Sex is not a promise. When Bobby uses it at a wrong place, that's one thing. So it actually weaves all these themes of abandonment, of masculinity, of mental illness, of marginality, all these things into the narrative of the film. But I also thought that we can also, if we move out of the narrative of the film, we can think about something like what are the historical conditions which made this film possible to show this kind of a masculine figure, to show hegemonic masculinity as kind of toxic masculinity, and personify it as a kind of pathology and madness, uh, and all the things which it questions, which I now said. It might not have been possible, say 5 or 10 years back. So what are the other historical conditioning which happened in Kerala which made this possible? So in that sense, we can think about the things which happened in Kerala, like the Kiss of Love protest, the feminist movements, the Dalit movements, all these things have subtly contributed into the narrative of the new wave cinema. So that's another direction which we can take, the direction the discussion can take. How if we try to place this Kumbalangi Nights within the history of new wave Malayalam cinema, which many critics consider that started with the film Traffic in 2011. So some of its characters, many of its characters, Kumbalangi Night shares. So it's not a star-centric, superstar-centric film, and all the characters in the film share almost kind of equal screen space within the narrative of the film. So it is not the star, but either the plot, the narrative, or the technique which is important in this new wave of movies. Then something which I already discussed, it's hyper local character, yet universally appealing nature. For example, Kammattipadam, Angamali Diaries, Imayau, all these Kumalanyi Nights, all these films are very hyper local. It's located within that space. You can't pull it out of there. But it has a universal appeal in terms of the inner psychological drama which it narrates, or the themes which it deals with. So it takes us to another question of whether we can whether the connection it makes with the films, Middlebrough films of the 80s. So these new wave films don't connect with its immediate predecessors, but it connects with the films of Middlebrough films of KG George, Padmarajan, or Bharadan movies, which were realistic and which also tried to portray a kind of inner psychological drama and questions which are very subtle. Uh, so, so I have read that in an article by Muralidharan Tarail, he has said that we can place the new wave Malayalam cinema somewhere in between Italian neo-realism and what we call as film noir. That's where we can place these films. And something which I already said, how it inculcates ideas from Dalit movement, or something like, you can think about something like WCC, Women Cinema Collective, the formation of Women Cinema Collective within Malayalam cinema. All these things, it has inculcated ideas from all these things. So it's not like an out of place, something coming out of nowhere, but it's a historical juncture which make this kind of Malayalam films possible nowadays. Then you can place it against Dilish Pothan, one of the directors of this new wave cinema. So he has said that there was realism, there was a mixture of realism and melodrama in films of, say, Srinivasan, Satyanandikad, etc. in the late 80s and 90s. But they never questioned the adhering conventional beliefs. about society or about life or anything. But he says that the new way cinema actually questions our conventional uh, beliefs, and he believes that it is possible because there is a young generation. It's not that everything has changed, but there is a young generation which is ready for change. I myself was thinking that it might be also a result of a kind of film viewing culture which Kerala could develop through film festivals, movie clubs, and all these things over the years might have contributed to this kind of uh, a film. But on the same time, you also have to think that it's the same Kerala which saw large scale protests against women entering Shabarimala in the year before, and it's the same in the same place. This kind of a movie which questions patriarchy and hegemonic masculinity was a box office hit. So this another thing is that these films are very low budget films, new wave films. The budget of this film was only 6 crore, which is actually equal to the maybe the budget of a movie song in Telugu or Tamil, and scored some 40 crore, I think, in the box office, which is a good return for a small budget film. So I will just end here. But something else, one more point. C.S. Venkadeshwaran, the critic, has actually said that he critiqued the film, saying that it actually has the same popular narrative structure. There is a love story, and lovers join at the end, and there is a damsel in distress, and these men go and save them. All these things are same of popular narrative technique. But I think he misses what the narrative subtly does, uh, through its subtle, even though that larger narrative is there. And the way in which that last scene, the climax, was shot, where actually I felt it comparable to something of a Tom and Jerry, cartoon. In a very cartoonist caricature way, that scene was shot. I don't know if it was, even though Sham Pushkaran himself said that he is not very satisfied with that climax. If it had a very normative, ending, other than this making it into a madness, I don't know. It might have been very cliche kind of uh, ending for the film. So yeah, these are the directions: the masculinity, the question of family, the hero, the career of Fahad Fasil, the question of women and agency, the question of place, uh, then the subtle dialogues and the questions about religion, morality. So something like virtue versus morality is what the film brings in, I think. Uh, then placing it within the larger narrative of new wave Malayalam cinema, how can we read it? So I think these are the directions which our discussion can take. I'll stop here.
Okay, thanks, Kavya, for giving us, a sense of the film, even as you have given us some threads of discussion that we can pursue from here. Thank you very much. I think if possible, we can start with Rajiv Ramachandran. We can go to Rajiv Ramachandran now, or would you prefer responding to questions, or how would you like it, Rajiv Ramachandran? Okay, then maybe we'll start with some other responses and then go to Rajiv Ramachandran by and by. Anyone else who would like to come in at this point about the film or about any of the points that Kavya laid out in her discussion of the film? Anyone who wants to come in?
Good evening.
Yeah, go ahead, Layali.
I want to start with one point which attract my attention is the characterization. We have I noticed that one technique which has been used or which has been given scope or focus in Kambalangi Nights is to exploring the psychological motives or psychological impulse. So giving the spectators the idea about the motives or psychological impulse of the characters can help us to anticipate the reaction of the characters in the entire film. I'd like also to share Shakespearean contribution in the field of plot, which himself also give important or special focus on this point. I mean the characterization of the character and its relation with the dramatic action. Shakespearean contribution in the field of plot can be summarized in the sense that he has been devoting his focus on characters' movements. It means its active role to react with the different atmospheres and different circumstances, to examine the will of the character to interact with the surroundings, which leads to enlarge the dramatic action, which in turn demand to find enough justification of the action movement in one side and characters' movement in another side. In other words, we can say that focusing on characterization as an harmonious link with the rhythm of dramatic action. We can see in the space, we can see the space which given to different characters in Kambalangi Nights. We did not see that the scope is given to one character over the other characters, but we see group of characters are engaged in the entire scene. And also, I wanted to make brief account of three other famous writers regarding to the same point. I will make a brief account to Victor Hugo and Gustave Vertage regarding this point.
Layali, just a second. Before you make your point, I just want to announce that since there are many people who are joining us for the first time today, this Zoom session comes to an end in another minute or so, but the discussion will not end. Please go back and use the same link and come back again. I mean, you can log back again using the same link. Yeah, so you can continue, Layali.
Yeah, I'd like to make a brief account of three famous writers regarding this point, which is the harmony between characters' movement and the dramatic action. I will start with Lessing, German writer and critic. According to Lessing, to justify any action of character, there must be a justification of psychological impulse in the action. Within it, the character engaged. He indicated that the recipient or the spectators must reach to the extreme that he feels the same emotion of the character, like anger or fear or any. Lessing commented on exploring the psychological impulse or psychological motives and the role which it plays in the side of spectator to expect the reaction or logic reaction of characters, because some writers, they are giving for example much focus on surprising, and surprising sometimes cannot be logic for us, because we cannot make any relation between the movements of the character and the action. He instead gives more importance to the anticipation element. And in the same regard, we have Gustav Vertage. It's German. He is German writer. In his book,
so you come back, Layali, you come back to the film. You come back to the film.
Yeah. I am
Okay.
talking about technique which has been used in the film, and I also give some comments from famous writers on the technique which has been used in the film. Gustav Berthold, which is a German writer,
We are not able to hear you.
I'm not audible.
Ah, yes. Now you're back.
Yeah. He also ensured the significance of exploring the psychological motives of the characters in which they are involved. That is the following their movement changes, rather the action is a cumulative motions and experience. I will tell this comment. I am telling about three famous writers which have been ensured these techniques which has reflected in the film Kambalangi Nights. And they also assure that we can sometimes there are some films which have or celebrate great popularity, but they did not survive in our memory because they focus on the surprising element rather than the anticipating element. But the point or the technique which I like in the Kambalangi Nights, that the psychological motives are reflected very well. We can see it, so we can anticipate the reaction. So we can see a kind of logic in these actions.
Yeah.
This is was my comment in brief, and I hope that I was understood.
Yeah. You were talking about characterization, and you were taking
characterization and the harmonious link between characterization and the dramatic action.
Sure. Okay. Anyone else would like to come in at this point? Yeah, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself. Give me an indication that you want to speak, and then I'll ask you over. Anyone? Okay, Vandana Sharma, please go ahead. This is Sanjay Kumar. Yes, sorry. Go ahead. Sanjay Kumar, please unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, the most important dialogue in the film was when Vijay's wife, Vijay, who is already dead, and then Vijay's wife Sati comes to live with the family of these four brothers. She says that when I eloped with Vijay, my mom cursed me. The curse would follow to ruin here. That's my fate. Then this Bobby replies, he says that, what his name, I think it's Bobby, he says, then you have found the right place. There is nothing left here to be ruined. That's a very interesting line because it reminded me of Communist Manifesto, and in the end Marx says that the proletariat has nothing to lose. So that raises the question of honor. That here, in the typical bourgeois family, you have to protect the honor. And on the other hand, we find the contrast in the family of Shami, when Shami projects himself as the guardian of the honor of the family, which he has to protect at every cost. And there is a point when he could have even indulged in honor killing. He could have almost killed the sister-in-law. But At the same time, he is saying, which reminds us of the ideology of the family that, I'm like your brother, and then again, his wife reminds him that, that even if you are a brother, you don't have any right to, dominate over your sister. So what happens that in the family of these brothers, Saji, Bonnie, Frankie, and Bobby, that they don't have so-called social capital. Say they, because they do not have this so-called prestige in the locality, so they have nothing to lose in that context. They are in an advantageous position rather, so they can grow, they can go for something progressive. They are not bound by the bourgeois values. They are not carrying the burden of protecting the honor, in the sense honor within quotes, because they don't have honor. They don't have the social capital, though they are trying to accumulate some economic capital. And obviously, except for the youngest brother, others are not, I think, so much educated or literate. So in that sense, they have hardly any economic capital, cultural capital, or social capital. So they have nothing to lose. So you can afford to be more progressive. So that I found very interesting. And on the other hand, in the family of Shami, they have a lot of things to lose. So they become hysterical. I mean, not they, but particularly Shami. So he wants to protect the so-called honor at every cost, which can be pernicious, which can be, very noxious to the family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Sanjay Kumar. Anyone would like to respond, or Kavya would want to respond now?
No, I don't want to respond now. Let everyone else speak.
Okay. Okay, fine. Okay, while others gather their thoughts, then let me kind of try to bring in Rajiv Ramachandran also into the discussion. I think, as Kavya was saying, some of the high points of the film was this contrasting between a kind of a family of women with this man trying to take on the reins of a patriarch, or trying to assert himself vis-a-vis the other family, which is still, trying to find itself, or even which sees itself as a problematic family. So it's not even a family according to its own members. So in that sense, the contrast between the two is very, very interesting. With regard to subtitling, I noticed the subtitles, in my second viewing this time. So I was wondering if we can talk a little bit about the strategies of subtitling. In a recent film, for instance, that we were watching, dialogues are subtitled, but something that comes on the radio is not subtitled. I'm not talking about this film, but generally, what is the basis of the choice made for what to subtitle and what to leave out in terms of what to bring on screen? For instance, one of the things I noticed in this film was there was an attempt to translate some of the sounds. So the wrapping of a lungi, or some other sound. So it seems like the logic of the subtitling was not just linguistic, but also for the hearing impaired, to bring some of the sounds of the film onto the screen. I wonder if Rajiv Ramachandran would like to talk a little bit now about the strategies that he finds useful, or he adopts for subtitling the film. Rajiv Ramachandran?
Yeah, thank you, Nikhila. Thank you for your kind words. I actually, nobody has noticed this aspect of subtitling. Actually, subtitling is from our point of view, it's a thankless job. Nobody even cares to, what we can say, to comment on it. But the thing is, on the outset, let me say something about the film. I can either talk anything on behalf of the crew of the film, or not take questions on the film, because I was not part of the team. I was part of. I entered to this whole thing after the production. I was part of the post production only. Although I wrote the English subtitles, which was a first for me, for your information. I had been into journalism for the last 2 decades. This was the first film I tried to subtitle. Yeah, actually, Shyam Pushkaran was my friend. He just asked me to, can you try this? So I took it up. That's it. The thing, as you said, Nikhila, I've tried actually not subtitling. I tried to caption it. There's a difference between subtitling and captioning. I think you might be knowing. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you're audible. Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, there's a slight difference between the captioning and subtitling, especially the closed captioning. You might be, you must be students of linguistics and what you call comparative literature or translation or whatever. The closed captions and subtitles may look similar, but they are designed for two different purposes. Subtitle provide a what you can call text alternative for the dialogue or video footage. That is, as you said, the spoken words of characters or the vocal participants, what we call. Maybe characters dialogue, maybe the some narration voiceover part and things like that. But closed captions, on the other hand, is it's not only supplement for dialogue, but other relevant part of the soundtrack also, describing the background noises, the phone, the ringing of phone, other audio cues, and the total ambient sound which need to be described. Is it clear?
Yeah, yeah, yes, absolutely.
I'm not very good. I'm not very good in talking that thing, and that's why I'm asking again and again.
No, you're perfectly clear. Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. The subtitles actually assume an audience who can hear the audio, right? But closed captioning addresses the audience who cannot hear the audio, and those who needs a test description for what they would otherwise be hearing. In the USA, they have started calling it SDH, subtitle for deaf or hard of hearing audience. So I think when we write subtitles for a movie, we have to keep in mind that there are viewers who can't hear or hard of hearing. But the thing is, in this category, there might be different set of people who know what a sound it is, who is just hard of hearing. They can hear, they know what a sound of something dropping to the floor. But there might be audience, there might be viewers who do not know anything about sound, who are born deaf. So the what you call the technique of writing subtitles is much more complex as compared to the notion we have. Subtitling is not just translation. Actually, in your means most of you are working in the field of academics. That's why, as per your terms, it might be in linguistic terms. It might be said. I guess I'm not very sure of. Like disemiotic translation in polysemiotic media. This is what I get as the definition of subtitling. So, hello.
Yeah,
Hello?
yeah. Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
we're all listening.
I'm getting back my own voice. That's fine. Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, but my voice is resonating through my headphone. That's why I'm having some slight trouble in talking.
Yeah.
Let me see, ma'am. I'm doing this thing for the first time. That's why.
Yeah, sure. And I think you were apologetic about your role. As a person who's been watching Malayalam films very heavily in the past 3-4 months, I can tell you that subtitles are one of the first criteria that I go by to watch films. If there is subtitle, we watch it, otherwise we don't. So it's as simple as that. So you're in some ways central to our choice of films. Also, Shubha here has mentioned how your subtitles has communicated very well the humor in the film, since most of it is not usual slapstick comedy. Your subtitles have captured the humor.
Actually, that was the most challenging aspect of this work. Man, it was entirely the work was challenging for me because I was doing it for the first time in my life, subtitling a movie. I had translated something, but I was doing the subtitling thing for the first time in my life. So it was obviously it was challenging, but recreating this humor sequence, that was a bit bit tough. Actually, I don't think I had done justice to Shyam's script and the performance of the actors. Actually, when I first watched this, was the first version of the movie. Actually, I have to tell you that this version, this final version you have been watching in the Amazon Prime or even in the theaters, it is the ninth version of this film. They have edited, re-edited, then again edited. They have trimmed, added something, and edited out something. This when I first watched this movie, it was about 2 hours and 30 minutes or so. They have to trim it, n number of trimming and editing and all. When I first watched this movie, I what I can say, the I was following that boy, that random boy who was picked up by the camera, Frankie. I just followed him in the ground. I followed him when he scored that goal. Then he came back to the dormitory. He was talking to his friends, and he was going to his native for the vacation. And I was just following him. That is how I watched the movie. I watched the movie throughout the movie. I watched the total movie in the point of view of Frankie. I haven't been seen any such reviews in that point of view. A teenager's POV of this kind of what Kavya called hegemonic masculinity. He is being trained to be part of that milieu. This as he's a teenager, but how he that was, I think I have been talking with Shyam constantly when I was doing this subtitling. Shyam also was moving through that arc of Frankie. He was following Frankie. Frankie was seeing things. Frankie was observing his brothers, fighting brothers, the caring mute Bonnie, and taking Saji to the therapist and all. And I tried to watch the movie through the arc of the character Frankie. So it was slightly different, I guess. All other points have been mentioned by Kavya and others,
Yeah,
especially that Marxian thing by I didn't get his name.
Sanjay Kumar. Sanjay Kumar.
Sanjay. Sanjay.
Yeah. And Minu would like to come in. Minu has a question for you. Please go ahead, Minu. Unmute yourself
Yeah,
and you can ask.
I'd be comfortable taking questions
Yeah.
rather than.
Yeah, sure. Minu, go
They
ahead.
means questions about my contribution.
sure.
I'm nobody
Sure.
to talk about the movie.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, when Anaka told me about this discussion and asked me to participate, I suggested to invite Shyam, and then I talked to Shyam, but he's busy writing some things. He's seriously engaged into three scripts right now, so he was not available. Otherwise, he would have been happy to.
No, Minu's question probably will be about subtitling. Go ahead, Minu.
Oh,
Yes.
welcome.
Yeah, go ahead, Minu. Minu, you can go ahead. Yeah, you're not audible. Minu, please go ahead. Yeah, we are not able to hear you, Minu. Do you want to type your question? We are not able to hear you. Yeah, anyone else? Anyone else in the meanwhile while Minu sets right her audio?
Yeah, I want to say something about the subtitling.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes,
Sanjay Kumar,
yes,
please go ahead.
yeah. So I noted particularly two examples, and I would be interested in knowing exactly what was happening in your mind. I mean, this is question to Mr. Rajiv Chandran, Mr. Rajiv Ramchandran, that what was happening in your mind when you were giving the subtitles. So particularly these two examples, Vinayakan is referred. Okay, for a person like me, I don't know much about Malayalam films, and I don't know who is Vinayakan. Frankly, I don't know. He might be a great actor, but I don't know personally. Okay, so in the bracket, in the parenthesis, you have given in the subtitle a popular Malayalam writer. She says she looks like Vinayakan. Now, who is Vinayakan? I don't know as a spectator. So you are helping the spectator to read this, in more intense way, that and to generate the meaning from it, that Vinayakan is someone who is a popular Malayalam actor. And secondly, when you mention the Ladybird, again in the parenthesis you mention girls bicycle without top bar. Okay, so these two examples I liked particularly, and I would like to know, when you were giving the subtitles, what was in your mind, that how to convey maximum meaning to the spectator, how they can derive the maximum. Yes.
Yeah, Sanjay, simple Sanjay, I was just trying to be in your shoes. That's it. So I was just trying to be a viewer who could not understand Malayalam. So I thought when there was a confusion. There were actually that sequence involving this Vinayakan thing. Actually, previously the dialogue was, he looks like Christopher Gale, means Chris Gale, the cricketer. Actually, he looks like Gale, this actor. His name is, I guess, the guy who played Prashant in the film, who is actually looking like, it's a real lookalike of Chris Gale. So the dialogue was, initially the dialogue was, the initial versions of the film, the dialogue was, he looks like Chris Gale. Then there was some afterthoughts, and then they redubbed it to Vinayakan. So Vinayakan is very popular in Malayalam films of late. He's a what do you call, it's an uncanny, unorthodox actor, and who happens to be a Dalit actor of Malayalam, who has been awarded the Best Actor award for the last year for his performance in Rajiv Ravi's Kammatti the film. Actually, he was not the hero of the film, yet the committee gave the Best Actor award to Vinayakan, which was a first in the history of Malayalam film award. This thing. So when I was subtitling this sequence, I was just trying to be in a non-Malayalist shoes. So I tried when we translate it just to as Vinayakan, nobody will get any sense of it. So I took the liberty to explain it a bit. It's not typical in subtitling. The same thing the Ladybird thing also, it has the slight of means boys talk, what you call. He was referring his genital parts being it could be damaged or something like that. I am not very sure of that dialogue, but now I forgot it. So there too I tried to explain a bit. Ladybird is the cycle without that crossbar, which is used by girls. So the same thing I did in the subtitling of Virus also. There was a lot of medical terms, which was in that, I don't know, you have watched that movie. There was a lot of hospital sequences and doctors and nurses talking about the medical this thing. They were using abbreviations all the time. So when subtitling that movie, I did the same thing. I went on explaining the things in brackets. So I don't know any other audiovisual translators does this. I don't know.
Yeah, probably Minu.
I thought it will be good.
Yeah, probably Minu will tell us. She does, I think, some audiovisual translation. Go ahead, Minu. I think your audio is better now. Yeah, please go ahead. We are not able to hear you, Minu. Okay, Vipin, then please go ahead. Minu says she'll come back. Vipin, go ahead. Vipin.
Hi, hello everyone. So as Kavya said, this film is a very meticulously done film, and partly the meticulous nature of the film comes from the fact that it is also like aware of many of the ideological struggles that are happening in the industry and in the outside world. So one of the things that struck me was the question of masculinity, and I agree with most of the things that Kavya said. So I think that the problem with the Shami character is partly is that the kind of masculinity that he wants to perform is not really effective in the film. Like if you remember the way in which his own wife sort of retorts to him, saying that whatever kind of brother you are, you cannot talk to a baby that way. Or even those small children who comes to the ground to play football, the kind of picture that they present of Shami is not a very it's not in good sort of so I think one of the problem is that it is, I mean, he wants to perform a certain kind of masculinity, but then that fails, obviously. And it is also clear that he, by performing that, he's actually trying to, in a way, substitute a certain lack of a figure, a patriarchal father figure in the family. which again is not it's not very successful. And I think it's partly because of historical reason also. I mean, if you look at not just Kumbalangi Nights, but in many other films, the way old people are portrayed, I mean, old not necessarily in terms of age, but people who bear certain values, a certain moral worldview. Most of the time, they are a group of people who actually are made fun of in many of these films. So I think uh, the problem here is that this specific idea of masculinity that um, Shami wants to perform is no more, in some sense, effective. And I think what Kavya said about C.S. Venkateswaran's criticism of the film, that this is a usual kind of, the boy and the girl falls in love, and then there is some obstacle, and then eventually they sort of get united, is partly true. But I think there is a very important sort of thing that Venkateswaran misses out, which is this thing about madness itself. I mean, if you think of another possibility, suppose Shami was not to be mad. I mean, mad doesn't necessarily mean clinically mad. I mean, the mother says, "Avanu vattana." So that is also a very everyday kind of saying. I mean, if you may actually say that about anyone. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're clinically mad. You're sick, right? So if he were not to be mad, then probably the film narrative will have to go into other complications, like the kind of the kind of familiar pattern that we have in many of these romantic sort of movies. The conflict with what you call the father figure, all that. So I think in one way, the fact that Shami at some point in the narrative suddenly becomes mad, or even clinically mad, is actually a very interesting sort of twist that happens to the narrative. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was this idea of the family. I think largely the film is also about the reconstitution of the family, but this reconstitution of the family is also, in some sense, making these four brothers, half brothers, productive members in the economy. At the end of the movie, they have to find a job. They have to become productive members of the family and also the economy. And there, I think there is something very interesting, because one thing that Kavya said is about the fisher folk. Now, how after the flood, fishing has been now seen as a profession that you can, not exactly maybe a profession, but then something that, people do for a living. And the way in which after the flood and the kind of heroic intervention by the fisher folk, the way in which they are sort of, um, um, uh, sort of accepted into this larger social sort of world is one thing. But there is connected to that. There is also one thing that probably Kavya missed out, is that, I mean, she definitely talked about um, um, the fact that Kumbalangi is, I mean, she talked about tourism, but the fact is also that Kumbalangi is also a designated tourism village. So when you talk about fishing here, it's not simply going and fishing like fishermen do, but it is also in some sense performing fishing to some other. So there are a few sequences in the movie also where these tourists come, and then Bobby has to perform fishing. So that is also something very interesting. Kavya said fishing choreography. So this is something that is choreographed, that is staged for the other also, the tourist as well. And I think this particular way in which uh, this particular thing is also, in some sense, I think the connection with tourism and the way in which uh, fishing has been now considered as an accepted profession, or these things, I think, also organize the larger gaze of the sort of movie. And we also need to remember that when Baby at the end of the film says that you can go back to fishing, she's saying that without any kind of inflated sense of social status, or that Shami has about his own job, and the way he's an earning member of the family. So that is also something that I found very interesting about this movie. So yeah, so these two things.
Yeah. Yeah. Kavya, you want to come in? Otherwise, Bhagyalakshmi, I think, has unmuted herself, and also Tarakeshwar. Bhagyalakshmi first and then Tarakeshwar.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, Bhagyalakshmi, go ahead.
And thank you, Kavya, for it was a wonderful reading actually, and Raju sir for the interesting subtitles that made the movie really very fascinating to read. And I just want to make some comments only. One is about family itself, how they are looking at the institution of family. I mean, both the families and setting up of a family seems to be important in both the so-called families, whether it is ideal or not. I mean, Baby Moll's family and Saji's family, because family, the concept of family seems to be important. And again, the idea of modernity reaches them in the form of a kind of bathroom or toilet when the women come to Saji's family, because it is evident from Bashir's text also, into Pupaikurana undarnu. In that text also, the idea of modernity is shown to the coming of toilet to her family actually. But now it is here. But in Baby Moll's family, bathroom is a space for Shammi to shape his masculinity. And I felt this very interesting, actually, this bathroom. Again, it's the movie also seems to be realistic in terms of the lives of the fishing community and fishing. Because earlier in Ramu Karyat's Chemmin, it was criticized as lacking in terms of the art of fishing and fishing net. What they have done is not real or something like that. There was a criticism. But in this movie, it seems to be a realistic when we think about it. And also, I loved Fahad Fasil, and who did the role of Shami, and Saubin, who played the role of Sachi. They have done their roles brilliantly. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bhagyalakshmi. Anyone else? We have a little less than a minute, so we may go off any time, but we'll come back. I think Rajiv Ramachandran, please don't go away. Meenu still has her questions for you. So please be with us and come back again. Tarakeshwar, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. I just wanted to bring the threads together because it was Kavya has raised certain important issues for discussion, and then others have also pitched in. I think there are one is the question of masculinity, and then the family. The other question was raised was about the question of capital and class. I think these two have to be brought together. Then the discussion would be fruitful. The question of Jolie, the job, is very important in the film. Only when you have a Jolie, you can become a middle class. And all the families are trying to aspire for the middle class, which is a normative family. So even the all the families that come in the narrative are lower middle class, including that of the Shemi. He is also a barber. But there is an aspiration there too. And one family lacks a father figure and the other family lacks the mother figure. So bringing a father figure there and bringing a mother figure here, bringing women here to the family to make it a middle class family is something that this family, these boys are aspiring to. So bringing women was very, very important to make it a middle class family. They never could imagine that 4 boys could be a family. So it needs a woman. And if the film begins with that Frankie feeling that he lacks a family unlike his other friends. So it starts with that, and finally it ends with bringing women into the family. So in that sense, both uh, the question of class and the gender have to be brought together to make sense of the masculinities. It is not only Shemi's masculinity, even the four boys, their masculinity is also important. In no way their masculinity is less toxic. Some of their masculinity is also toxic, except that of again this boy, Frankie, who is less uh, is more amenable to talking to women and in a respectful way, and so he is aspiring to that middle class normative family. Somewhere the narrative is moving towards this normative middle class family sans a toxic sick masculinity of Shemi. So in that sense, it's important to bring in both the class and gender together to make sense of this narrative. And again, it has to be placed in the context of the changes that are being brought in the present context. One is the Vipin spoke about fishing as performance, and there is fishing as performance, fishing as skill represented by Bobby, and fishing as an industry. So all these different aspects of fishing also come together to make sense of it. So I think with these words I will stop here.
Okay, thank you, Tarkeshwar, for pulling together the strands of the discussion. Minu, I have noticed Geeta and Shubha. We'll just go back to Minu for a while because she's been trying to speak to Rajiv Ramachandran. Please, Minu, go ahead.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, hello.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you about something you mentioned about closed captions or subtitles for the hard of hearing. So that's one kind of an audience, and you also mentioned subtitling for a different kind of an audience who do not really understand who Vinayakan is. That's with the explanation. That's done, but with the character limits and the time it's on the screen, subtitles are on the screen. That's difficult to incorporate. So my question really is, who do you consider the primary audience when you subtitle a movie? So why I'm asking is this is because we expect with subtitles the movie to become truly global, right? Especially when it is shown on an OTT platform. So when we leave words like "dia" in subtitles, so are we looking at more of a pan-Indian audience to view the movie, or someone who's already familiar with the culture somehow, or
No,
like a truly global audience?
I don't know whether to put it as a truly global audience, but I think my primary concern is the non-Malayalam speakers, those who cannot understand the language Malayalam as even one of their familiar languages. That's what I imagine my target audience are. Saying this, I am not claiming that I am a means thoroughly professional subtitler. I have only done 4 or 5 Malayalam films and some 15, 16 things back into Malayalam. It means this kind of audiovisual translations for Marvel and Disney movies. So I'm not claiming big, but I think as far as I'm concerned, my target audience are the non-Malayalam speakers or those who cannot understand the language in the first place.
Okay. And purely from, I research some subtitles, so I have actually a lot of questions to ask, but I know the time is limited. So I just wanted to ask what your strategy usually is. when you subtitle that is, do you get specific instructions from Amazon Prime or from I think you kind of mentioned it already, that you talk to Shyam Pushkaran and this is your vision.
Am I interrupting?
Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
no.
Go ahead, please.
So I talked to Shyam Pushkaran because Shyam is my friend. That's all. It was Shyam who introduced me to this. That's why Shyam is a very good friend of mine. That's how we usually talk about. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. And the Amazon Prime has nothing to do with the Malayalam films as such. At this point of time, they are not interfering or intervening in this writing of subtitles. But as far as the English films that are subtitled to our translated to Malayalam, they have certain guidelines for that.
Okay, Shubha. Yeah.
Because I've Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Meenu.
Yeah, because I've actually heard that and seen that some of the subtitles that come on big screen in theaters, and when they come on OTT platforms, they are completely different. So I
are you referring Kumbhalangi Nights?
No, I don't think so. But I was talking in general actually. So when you talk, so even with Virus, do you really? I actually interested in the process of subtitling.
Actually,
so
Virus.
Yeah,
Meenu, I did the subtitles for Virus also. Virus during the Virus thing, we had some problems. Actually, Virus was got totally what we say. There was some editing goof up, if I can say so, in Virus. So I'm not in liberty to reveal further. So it was nothing to do with subtitling or something from Amazon Prime or something. There was some issues with the editing. They had to edit out some things, scenes, some dialogues was edited out and replaced by some other dialogues. So there was some confusion regarding the subtitles. That's an entirely different thing. I don't think Amazon Prime or any OTT platforms when their intervention or what you call interference or anything.
Okay, Shubha, please go ahead. I noticed that you had unmuted yourself.
Nikhila, I would like to talk to Meenu in person. If she is interested, she can come to me in my inbox.
Okay, Meenu, you heard that?
So much. Yes.
Okay, so you can continue this conversation off this discussion as well. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. So Shubha, please go ahead. You had unmuted yourself. Are you there? Shubha? Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else who would like to comment? Shubha is not here. She's not on the list. I can't see her. Yeah, Arsha, go ahead. Arsha, go ahead. Anyone else would like to come in at this point?
Can I talk about something else completely different?
Yeah. Go ahead. Meenu, go ahead.
So actually in Kerala, Saji has become the face of mental illness being, talked out in the open. So we can also see how like a lot of other people mentioned how there is a contrast between Shami and Saji. So now we have government ads where with the face of Saji saying, don't hesitate to call if you have a problem. Yeah, I just wanted to put it in there in the discussion. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, the corona ad, the corona advertisements of Kerala government actually says, "Be like Saji." So if you want psychological assistance, don't hesitate to call.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And another thing, because she raised this question, is some critique about the film regarding mental illness itself. That in making this kind of toxic masculinity into mental illness, it's actually problematizing mental illness itself, while these two are not the same. So people who study about psychological issues has raised this concern. So the pathology of illness and this cinematic personification of it are being questioned by many.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? People, so many are yet to respond.
If I can add to like think aloud in terms of what Tarakeshwar sir was saying, I was also thinking while watching the film. Suppose if we wanted to talk about masculinity, another way was to place a upper caste, middle class masculine figure on the one side as Shami's character, and then placing this other masculine figures. But instead of that, as he was already saying, both the families are in the lower middle class strata in some sense. So why it was done like that, I don't have an answer, but I was thinking, what is this class connection? Why Shami is a barber? So maybe we can think about. I don't have an answer. I also was thinking.
Okay. Okay. Suddenly we have dried up. No one seems to have much to say. I think.
Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead, Arsha.
Yeah. Hello. Hi. So I was just thinking again this movie. So right before Kumbalangi Nights, we saw a lot of movies coming to Malayalam, which are Kochi centered. Right. So, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about this idea of counter urbanization, shifting the focus from the city center to the suburbs. So this is the kind of tourism that is also being promoted, right, in Kerala. Right, welcome to God's own country. The very statement says that, right? It's away from your, the crowd, the bus, so shifting this entire, demography to suburban place. So before that, there is they have taken Kumbalangi out from they have removed Kumbalangi from Kochi. Yeah. So this place is well sustained in itself. Right. The only place where you see these people commuting to Kochi is only when they go out, these guys and these men and women, they go to go for a day out, right? That's the only time you see Kochi coming in actually. Otherwise it's more of Kumbalangi itself. So I was just thinking of this idea of this counter urbanization. I don't know if I can use this word, it's but still, yeah, this use of this idea, you shift this entire it's a social process too, right? Like counter urbanization. So you shift the entire demography into a suburb. Yeah, and it is focused there. That was kind of nice. He has done it before. Like Kavya has already said, like that other movie, Fahad and Anain Rasool. Yeah, so he has already done that. So this experimenting with these places seems like really interesting. That's all. I just had to like mention it. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Sarsha. Suraj has unmuted himself. Suraj, please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Go ahead.
Ma'am, I'm just adding to what Dr. Kavya and Dr. Tarakesha was telling about the issues of class and gender and caste. So the basically as you watch from the film, all the male characters in the films are aspiring to becoming hegemonic in some way. Not all, even if it's Shami or even if it's Bobby, but they are denied it. I'm considering. I mean, I'm thinking in the way that whether it is because of their caste or class position that their hegemonic masculinity is being denied. If you compare to the superstar films like Devastaram or Ravana Prabhu, any such films where the superstars are able to exercise their masculinity to a larger extent. But in most of these cases where these superstars are able to exercise their hegemonic masculinity, most of them come from very privileged castes like Menon or a very upper caste. So actually in this film, they all belong to a lower class strata. So I'm thinking whether they are denied this higher dimensions of masculinity because they are being lower middle class. Thank you.
Yeah. Would Kavya want to respond to this? Would it be seen as a kind of denial? Is it that, or I mean, how would you characterize it? Is it a form of denial? Denial by whom? Yeah, Minu has unmuted herself. Go ahead, Minu.
Anyone else can respond.
Yeah, Minu has unmuted herself.
Accidentally, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
This was again. This is connected to the earlier thing I said. Why Shami was not from an upper class background in the film is it's what he said. Suraj said is actually connected to that. What I said earlier, for which we actually I don't have an answer actually. How to like understand it. Even though like if we particularly go in the sense of caste, if we try to decode it in terms of caste from the Kerala context, if he's a barber by caste, then he belongs to an OBC community, and these people, Bobby and his half brothers, they may be, I think, from Latin Catholic community who are the fisher folk. So for under government category, they all belong to maybe OBC communities. But I don't know, like how to decode it. I don't know.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Anaga.
Yeah, Anaga, go ahead.
I think ma'am. The last point, what Suraj said about this caste and class. Sorry, and this Kavya ma'am said how this class difference, like Shami from if he is an OBC, he's from an OBC background, and against the opposite families or maybe they may be the same, like same caste or no, they are of same class, right? Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. I wanted to tell one point that even in SC community or OBC community, there are many castes inside that particular community. Like in SC community itself, there are many.
Okay. What happened, Anaga?
Anaka is not audible.
Okay. Tarakeshwar, you had unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
A quick response. I think the question of caste and religion doesn't come prominently within the narrative. So it is undermined. So it's mainly the class and gender which plays out within the narrative. So I think if we are discussing about gender, caste and religion, it's a superimposition. The narrative itself undermines both. So religion is not an issue there, caste is not an issue there. It's only the question of gender and class.
Yeah.
So I think what Anaka was trying to say was that in terms of, if we think in terms of caste itself, there are gradations within caste, within the same caste.
Yes, yes, that's what.
Yeah, in the same sense from what Tarakeshwar was saying, even though they both belong to lower class, lower middle class family, there is also a gradation in between their families.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this OBC is not a caste category. It is an administrative, but also a political category. Because there is a OBC movement, we can call it as a political category or the administrative category, because state recognizes certain communities in terms of OBC, BC, SC, ST. But it itself is not a caste in terms of community.
Yeah.
So in that sense, within that broad category, you will find different communities together.
Yeah. Vipin, go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to say something about this class question. Now, we need to remember that the entire narrative doesn't say anything about upper caste or upper class, section of society. So that itself, I find it a bit interesting, because one way to understand it would be to say that the upper class and the upper caste is not really part of the this aspirational struggle of Shammi's and Saji's family, probably. And the other thing is also, I mean, the film actually shows a certain struggle within that lower, as Anaka pointed out, probably that the lower sort of rungs of social order. So that may be one reason why the upper caste and the upper class is not really. I mean, there nowhere in the film there is no reference to that particular section of society. So that absence itself is something very interesting.
Yeah. Anyone else who wants to say anything about this particular point? Because Aisha has made a slightly different point. Before I read out what she wants me to say about this film. Anyone who wants to come in on this point? Yes, Bhagyalakshmi, go ahead.
But I think the class difference is always there, because as Shammi says to his assistant in the barber shop, the place that they live, I mean, Saji's family, and the Bullet he uses to travel, and the other place they don't have such things, and a good barber shop with modern facilities. And as I have already told, the difference, bathroom, toilet, it is there in their family. So all these things, and also they talk about whether their family status also. When he talks to Saji regarding the marriage proposal. So I think the class difference, through some ways they try to portray it. Also, there is the idea of why they have chosen a barber. Maybe barber may be trying to shape man's masculine features. Maybe because of that, they have chosen a barber as the main character in the movie. Can be. Just a comment.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, go ahead with
yeah. Just to clarify what I said, I mean, I'm not saying that there is no class distinction between Shammi's and Saji's family. What I'm saying is that that strata of society, which we can, call upper class or upper caste, is completely out of its purview. Which also, in some sense, explains why this film is located in the suburbs, not in the, the center, the city. And when we talk about class, the other thing is also, it's not just an economic category. It's also a category that refer to your taste, your sort of. So that way, there is definitely there is a difference between what we call the upbringing of Saji's family and the other one, Shammi's family. So definitely there is in terms of taste, upbringing, in terms of worldview, outlook, there is a huge difference. But economically, it's not so different. Is what something interesting.
I also think that, I mean, the point Tarakeshwar was making and also Kavya earlier is that class or this aspiration towards, some kind of social mobility is tied to the nature of the family. So family becomes the vehicle for achieving or aspiring to achieve class mobility. So that's somewhat interesting. Rather than see class as given as someone belonging to, as one family belonging to slightly higher or lower, I think both of them, through their aspiration towards particular kinds of families and particular kinds of associations within these families, are aspiring to normative bourgeois middle classness. So if we think of them as on the brink of middle classness, wanting to constitute themselves as bourgeois middle class family with the intervention or with the coming in of proper women into the households who will make this into a normative family, I think we can see this as in a more dynamic way. I mean, class as not something that is already there given, but something that both or all the protagonists in the film are trying to aspire or achieve. I think Ayesha, I'll just read out what Ayesha wants me to say. If anyone else has anything, I can call them next. Ayesha says the way mental illness was depicted in the case of Shammi was a little over the top. There have been loads of memes using that dialogue, Shammi hero, that he became a hero, hero Ada or something like that. I personally feel that his mental health part at the ending could have been handled better, especially in a movie where they have handled other aspects very subtly. So this is what Ayesha wanted me to read out. If anyone wants to say anything, fine. Otherwise, we can take up the next, go to whoever else is ready to respond.
Yeah, Nikhila, this is Sanjay here.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, since you brought it again, the issue of madness. As the line of division between the normal and the pathological is very thin. It is porous, which has been highlighted by many people. But when you make this character Shammi as clinically ill, as it has been portrayed in the film, and on the other hand, Saji also consults this psychiatrist. I found that rather, an advertisement of psychiatry, because as R.D. Lang has said, that, and he did a lot of research on this, and he was a part of the anti-psychiatric movement in 1960s. Even Foucault, took the subject much later, but these people, R.D. Lang and David Cooper, Thomas Szasz, they were the part of this movement of anti-psychiatry, which was called anti-psychiatry. So the Saji also, he wants to consult, which I found funny, because normally in rural areas, people don't consult. I mean, of course, Kerala's case is different, but in a typical rural setting, people would not like to consult psychiatrists, because this is an urban phenomenon which presents, kind of highlights the medicalization of the society. That for these kind of problems, you are searching psychiatrists. That you can easily resolve, just by sharing your feelings with the friends. Of course, I can understand that here, Saji is feeling a bit alienated because he's fighting with his brothers, and then the Iron Man who he wants to leave him also. So even then, I found that this Shami didn't have to be actually clinically mad, or at least portrayed as clinically mad, because in our society, for honor killing, which he was going to do almost, you don't have to be clinically mad. Even in normal way also, this our patriarchy is enough for that. Okay, our patriarchy is enough to cause that madness, to sow the seed of madness in you, to kill your sister or anybody in the family who you think that is violating the honor of the family. So I think you don't have to be really mad, actually, in the sense that clinically mad. The normal is already pathological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that point. I think we just have about 5 minutes before the discussion will come to an end. Anyone who would like to come in at this point? Otherwise, we will give the last words to Rajiv Ramachandran and Kavya.
No, Nigla, I would like to add 2 points to this discussion.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Actually, Sanjay was talking about that psychiatrist. Actually, that character, for me, he's not a psychiatrist, but a psychologist or therapist. But there's another hitch in that characterization. In fact, the touch, what you call physical contact, is not legal in therapy or psychology, means this clinical psychology. So he, or the entire sequence, was showing a healing through a non-clinical way, or what we can say, so being empathetic. That's it. So I don't think it's not a he's not a psychiatrist per se, and of course that's a kind of fictionalized, non-realistic sequence. Then another thing I would like to point out in this film is that actually the character of that uncle of Simi and Baby Mol, that homemaker uncle whom Shami ridicules for his role in the family, he is the first character in this film shown as somebody who reversed the traditional role of male in a family. He's a out-and-out homemaker who cooks a multi-cuisine dinner for his newlywed niece and her husband, while his wife works abroad, probably as a nurse. You can see her only through that video call conversation. And interestingly, the character is played by Ambika Rao, who played the role of the Baby Mol's and Simi's mother herself. And I can add that there was there was an edited out scene of Baby Mol, Simi and Shami coming back after that dinner. It was an exterior night sequence where Simi talks about her uncle with high regard to Shami, and Shami again ridicules him as it's not the role of a so-called male inside a family. Your father might be a good cook or good nurse, but he's not entitled as the head of a family. That's what Shami says in that diligent scene. That entire scene got it was almost a 7 to 10 minute scene. The entire scene got deleted from the film.
Okay. Kavya, you want to come in? We just have a couple of minutes. Yeah.
I just wanted to talk to Rajiv Ramchandran. Actually, first time I watched the film, I watched it without subtitle, of course, because I can understand Malayalam. But when I came to know that you are coming, I watched it again with subtitles. Actually, as Nikhila ma'am already pointed out, I like the fact that you gave gave captions to the sounds in the movie. That's the first time actually I am noticing somebody giving a caption to the sounds in the movie, and especially I will call translation of the songs, the choice of words, diction. I enjoyed, and also I was thinking how you made a choice of words like for that thing cover. Uh, so the light, moonlight on water. That's how you translated it, where you can actually use some heavy word like bioluminescence. That's actually what cover is. So I was thinking, but that choice of words actually made it simple to watch. When you are watching a movie, you can't look at dictionary and watch a movie. So actually, I like the choice of words you made and the translation of the sounds added to the effect of the movie. And because music and sound were so important in this movie, that actually added to the power of the movie for viewers who are from outside Kerala. To end all the points which I mentioned, I can actually write an essay about all of them in detail, but I just, because I wanted to talk only for a few minutes, I stopped it. But I think today we couldn't take it all up for a further discussion. I thought I'll come back to these points later on. We had a few participants only. Because if Anirudh sir and others were there, because I wanted to connect it with the earlier films which we watched, like Gandamude and the Broche Varuda. All these are new kinds of movies which portray this subaltern kind of male figures. So I thought we could have a discussion about the South Indian new wave kind of cinema and all that, which I pointed and left, but maybe on another occasion.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to discuss. Thank you, Rajiv Ramachandran, for joining us.